Welcome to Algebra to the Point, what you need to know. This chart will give you all you need to know for algebra. It is what all your algebra concepts are built on, which is simplifying with numbers and variables. So using the variable x for this chart for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. If you look at each of these, your goal would be to try to simplify if possible. And the side note, which we need to acknowledge, is that we are to assume that x is not equal to 0. So simplify any of these that you can, assuming that x is not equal to 0. And this is what all of algebra is built on and why it can be so confusing. So I encourage you to pause this and give it a try. Again, to simplify as many of these as you can. Some of them cannot be simplified. So if you go ahead and pause, and then we will discuss each one. All right, so going across row 1 for addition, we start with x plus x. So x plus x, those are like terms, the same variable, the same exponent. Therefore, we can combine those as 2x to make that more simplified. You can also think of that as 1x plus 1x. For subtraction, x minus x, again, those are like terms. You can think of it as 1x minus 1x. That is 0, 0, 0, 0, nothing left. A common mistake there is wanting to leave an x. You could say 0x, more simplified as just 0. For multiplication, x times x, anything times itself, you can rewrite it as the power of 2. So that would be more simplified as x squared. And then lastly, division, x divided by x. You could also view this as a fraction. Assuming x is not equal to 0, it would give you a 1. If x were indeed equal to 0, you would have the indeterminate form, getting into some calculus there. But if we assume x is not equal to 0, anything divided by itself would give you 1. Okay, moving on to the next row. We're trying to simplify using 1. So x plus 1, those are not like terms. You cannot put those together. So I'm just going to say you can't simplify for that one. Likewise for the subtraction column, can't do anything there. They are not like terms. And there's not a special rule or special case dealing with 1 for addition or subtraction. However, for multiplication and division, there is a special rule with 1. You can always multiply or divide by 1 without changing the value. So x times 1 would be more simplified as just x. Likewise, x divided by 1 would be more simplified as just x. So we would call this the multiplicative identity property for the multiplying column. You can always multiply by 1 and get the value that you started with. Moving on to our third row, we are still dealing with 1, but in the opposite order. So starting with 1 instead of our variable. So for number 3, 1 plus x, same as number 2, you cannot simplify. Those are not like terms, and so it doesn't matter. Even if you switched it around, cannot simplify. Same thing for the subtraction, 1 minus x, you cannot simplify. No special case with adding or subtracting with 1. But just like in the previous row, when you're multiplying by 1, multiplying is commutative, so it does not matter if it's x times 1 or 1 times x, you would still get x there. However, division is not commutative, so 1 over x is not the same as x over 1. You cannot simplify that. You can always divide by 1. So in the last one, we were dividing by 1. But in row 3, we are dividing by x. So without knowing the value of x, we cannot simplify there. Moving on to row number 4, now dealing with 0. Okay, so addition, x plus 0. Without knowing the value of x, if you add nothing to it, you will still have x, more simplified as just x. So even though those are not like terms, we talked about in row 2 and 3 that they weren't like terms, so you couldn't simplify. Because 0 is nothing, you can simplify. Adding nothing won't change our x, it will just keep it an x. Same with subtracting nothing. X minus 0 is just going to be more simplified as x. For multiplication and division, if you multiply by 0, anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So we need to simplify to 0 there. And anything divided by 0, so x over 0, you cannot divide by 0. So this is undefined. Connects to so many other concepts in algebra and beyond. You cannot divide by 0. If you type that in your calculator, any number divided by 0, so if you try 5 divided by 0, 6 divided by 0, negative 251 divided by 0, you will get undefined. You cannot divide by 0. And again, we were assuming here that x itself was not equal to 0. Okay, for the last row, we're still dealing with 0, but the other way around. So 0 plus x, 0 plus anything will still be that anything. So we can simplify that one to x as well. For subtraction, though, subtraction is not commutative. Addition is commutative. Subtraction is not. 0 minus x is not the same as x minus 0, but we can still simplify it to negative x. Okay, 0 minus x be like having a negative x. And 0 times x for the multiplication column, again, that is commutative. Multiplication is commutative. So we can just write 0. 0 times anything is 0. And last one, 0 divided by anything. So if I write this as a fraction, 0 over anything, 0 divided by anything will always be 0. So again, you can test that one out. 0 divided by any number will always be 0, with the exception of 0 itself. But again, we were assuming that x itself is not equal to 0. So this is a nice little chart to keep handy to refer to when simplifying, dealing with your variables and our 4 main operations. So hopefully this was helpful. Please look for other links for tips and tricks to make your life easier with math.